Okay, I am here and I am going to talk to you today about Winston Churchill. He he was a very fascinating person during World War II, and he had a very interesting upbringing and an interesting life. So I'm going to show you some pictures of Winston Churchill. But this is Winston Churchill, and he was a very important figure to remember, especially as we are celebrating and remember VE Day, and then uh, the upcoming uh, storming of Normandy, in Paris. So it's very important, and I'm going to talk to you about Winston Churchill because he really was a pivotal figure in World War II. He's renowned for his inspirational speeches that uplifted the British people. Many of the British people endured relentless bombing. They lived on food rations and they took refuge in subway tunnels, and they struggled during the war, we should never forget those struggles and the food rationing and the living in tunnels and the living with the daily bombing and having to worry about all of that. And it really helps us to appreciate the freedoms and the good fortunes that we still have today. But I have become very intrigued with Winston Churchill's life. I have watched numerous documentaries on him. Amazon Prime has a whole host of documentaries on him, and he was quite a fighter. He possessed a unique talent for motivating the British people. His speeches, we all know his famous speeches about how we will fight in the oceans, we will fight in the streets, we will never give up. Those are just indicative of the times, and he was very inspirational, and we really needed that during World War II. He delivered so many famous speeches, and you can read books about that, but he also wrote a numerous amount of books that if we were to start reading those books today, we'd never really finish them. He was such a renowned published author, and he won a Nobel Peace Prize. So he's one of the key figures because he was famous for fighting off and insisting that we keep fighting against Adolf Hitler. When some of the other prime ministers in his cabinet were saying, oh, we need to find a peaceful solution. We need to, have an appeasement. No, he said, no, we cannot win against Adolf Hitler. There's no way. So he kept fighting, and he was very resolved in that. But Winston Churchill, he had a very interesting story. He descends from the first Duke of Marlborough, John Churchill, and she was during Queen Anne's time. So I'm gonna just pull up the first Duke of Marlborough. So you can see that. I hope you can see that. Yeah, that's the first Duke of Marlborough right there. And he was an important figure during Queen Anne's time, and he initially started off as a page during the House of Stuart when James II, he's the king, he was at that time the Duke of York. That was during the House of Stuart's time. It's a very fascinating period of history if you want to read about it. The Stuart family, how James the First came in after Elizabeth the First didn't have any descendants. So James the First from Scotland, he was James the Sixth from Scotland, and he came in and he was the next heir because he was Queen Mary of Scots' son. So he was the next heir to the British throne. So he came in and they became the House of Stuart. Well, the first Duke of Marlborough is John Churchill, and he earned his ranking and his place in history with the Monmouth Rebellion in 1685. He also became victorious in the battles of Blenheim and many other battles, and this really secured his place in history. He was a very good military leader. He never lost any battles. He was also married to Sarah Jennings, and she had a very close relationship with the Queen Anne. And later on, this court intrigue, there was a falling out, and so they became, separated. But the Queen had awarded initially to help him have Blenheim Palace. So they, were going to help fund it, but apparently there was some retraction of some of those funds. And at any rate, they did finish Blenheim Palace. It's a beautiful palace, and I am going to pull that palace up. So look at that right there. That's Blenheim Palace. If you're able to ever be in England and visit that, that's a beautiful palace. I would love to add that to my list. And it's quite a lot to take care of. I was watching a documentary on that and what they do to keep it going. A lot of these palaces and castles over in England, they have to be maintained. The dukes of that time, they don't have the money to care for them, so they open them up to the public to help maintain them. They have a lot of events. There for a lot of entertaining venues, some marital venues, so many other things that they do to bring in revenue to help support these palaces and castles. So, and that's where we're at in this time is, a lot of these places need to be, they're beautiful palaces. They need to be kept up and they need to keep the revenue going. And I would add this to my list of castles and palaces to see. But this is a place where Winston Churchill had been born. He was born at Blenheim Palace. It's the ancestral home of the Duke of Marlborough. His father was Randolph Churchill, and he was a member of the British Parliament, but he had an unsuccessful political career. Winston had a mother who was an American socialite. Her name was Jenny Jerome. Winston was educated at the Harrow School and Sandhurst Military School. One of the things about Winston was in his early education, he really wasn't that great of a student. Everything was very Latin based and he just didn't absorb it very well. So his academic record is not very good. But once he went to Sandhurst, and in subsequent years, he really was, as we all know, he's a great writer. He's a great speaker. He's well knowledgeable in history. And he just thrived in the military. He found his niche in serving the military during the conflicts like Sudan, Africa, and the Boer War. Churchill became a statesman at the age of 25. He wrote numerous books and he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. During Queen Victoria's reign, his whole lifespan, he lived through 6 kings and queens. He was born during Queen Victoria's reign. He lived during King Edward's, King George V, King Edward VIII, King George VI, Queen Elizabeth II. He had a unique relationship with Queen Elizabeth. He used to bounce her on his knee when she was a small child, and then ultimately he became the prime minister during her reign. That began in 1952. He kind of helped guide her and show her the ropes, but he was such a key figure, and he did so well. The Queen actually offered him a dukedom. That is so rare. Prime ministers usually get an honorary title of life peerage, but they don't get a dukedom. Winston Churchill is the only one that was offered a dukedom, but he declined it. He declined it because he said, I would no longer be able to represent the people in the House of Commons. So, I mean, he really was such an honest politician, but I just think he was wonderful. So, I'm going to show you his wife, Clementine Churchill. This right here is Clementine Churchill. She was literally his strength and stay. You know, through every good man, there is a good woman. And the same thing for every good man, there's a good woman. Every good woman has a man behind him, behind her. So, and Clementine Churchill, in her own right, was just a wonderful wife to Winston Churchill. She married Winston Churchill. She was a baroness in her own right. She had her own peerage. She was loyal and dedicated politician's wife for 56 years until Winston died in 1965. One of the things about Winston when he died was he did get a state funeral, which is out on YouTube, documentary somewhere. It was a wonderful state funeral to watch if you ever see it. Clementine held a seat in the House of Lords and was involved in numerous organizations during both the World War I and World War II. During World War I, she organized canteen services and munitions. She served as chairman of the Red Cross Aid for Russian Fund and was president of the Young Women's Christian Association Wartime Appeal. She also chaired a maternity hospital. A lot of women during that time worked during World War I, World War II. They set up hospitals in some of these aristocratic houses, and they worked alongside the men, and they did a phenomenal job with their contributions. We have a lot of women in history during that time that should be noted for their contributions. Winston Churchill and his wife Clementine had 5 children together, and they lived at Churchill House. There, Winston became a dedicated and skilled painter and brick mason. He struggled with what he called his black dog. It's a term he used to describe his depression. However, with Clementine's support, he managed to overcome these challenging moments, particularly during the difficulties of World War II and what he called his wilderness years, when he was kind of resigned from some political failures that he had made. He went back to Chartwell and he kind of regrouped and battled his depression. Churchill faced several career setbacks, including his time as Chancellor of Executive during World War I and the failed Gallipoli campaign in 1915, which resulted in the deaths of approximately 100,000 soldiers. At the age of 42, he resigned, feeling that his political career was over, and then he fell into a deep depression. Nevertheless, he later joined the front lines in France, during the Battle of Flanders, where he thrived in combat, effectively battling his personal enemies of inactivity and despair. As his career rebounded, Winston Churchill returned to politics as the First Lord of the Admiralty in 1939. He was involved in several critical areas, including the armaments, the code breaking, Secret Service operations. Churchill read Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, and with this book, he was acutely aware of the dangers that were posed by Hitler and his Nazi Germany. He was vehemently denouncing Hitler's aggressive takeover of Austria and consistently resisted the policies of appeasement, which he proved to have the right stance. Again, everybody else in Parliament was wanting appeasement. They wanted appeasement. They were willing to give up certain territories. Understandably, when you read through the horrors of World War I mean, there was not a lot of time during those interwar years, maybe 20 years, 25 years of interwar years. But when you reflect back on World War the trenches, the killings, all of it, it was still such a recent memory, and they just did not want to go into another war. And I understand that stance, but Hitler was a whole different animal. He was determined to conquer. He was a tyrant, and he wanted to take over the world. And the way he did in Germany, the Nazi Germany ways were not good. So, and it was a good thing that this was one of the instincts with Winston Churchill, is he had an amazing instinct about this, that he just fought it. He, when they took over Austria, and then they took over Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. And then on May 8th, 1940, Churchill became the prime minister, and he led England through challenging struggles and helped keep the nation free from Nazi control. And I remember George VI was very nervous about him becoming the prime minister. And ultimately, they became very in sync with each other with regard to fighting off Hitler. And they were just determined to keep Hitler out of Britain, no matter the cost, no matter the blood that was shed, no matter what. There was no way they were going to let Britain get taken over. So that's why I wanted to talk about Winston Churchill. He was renowned for his wit, his humor, his ambition. He had exceptional skills as a writer and orator. He had a talent for putting himself in the spotlight, and I will say that he did like the spotlight. He did like being in the thick of things. And during the bombing of Coventry in November 1940, this resulted in 500 lives. Well, Churchill would walk the streets to connect with the grieving city. He would assess the situation, the damage, and he deeply felt the immense loss of life and all the soldiers and citizens that were affected. Throughout the war, Churchill consistently visited all the bombed neighborhoods to bolster the people's morale. He had an unflappable dignity and unwavering faith in the future, which reflected the qualities needed in a leader during such trying times. Winston Churchill, he is gonna exit out of that. He projected an image of confidence that inspired the English people to preserve their way of life, to preserve their country, to preserve their cities. I mean, they endured because they had his his uplifting speeches to keep them going on. I mean, and that is an indicative of the English behavior. They're stoic, they're strong, they're resilient, and he just projected this confidence. And when you have somebody that's projecting that confidence in your leadership, you're going to keep going. You're going to keep carrying on. In the midst of all the bombing, in the midst of the adversity, I mean, they pursued no matter what. They carried on, and they survived. Um, Ultimately, the Battle of Britain was won because Churchill had one single goal, and that's to defeat Hitler. He garnered the support of the British people, and he remains a beloved figure in the hearts of many British and American people and people all around the world. I mean, there are statues in Paris with Winston Churchill. We've got a couple of statues here in America of Winston Churchill, and he is just, I mean, to me, he's a very interesting figure. I mean, when you listen to all the documentaries, but that's all I'm going to talk about. But I would encourage you to watch every documentary, to read his speeches whenever you can, and remember him. I mean, even in his afterlife, he went back to being an MP after he was prime minister, and he still served the people up until his days when he was getting sick. He was 89 years old when he's pretty much stepped down because he was getting sick. He died at 90, and he just served the people. He never became rich. I think some friends paid for his Chartwell house so he had a place to live. Ultimately, the Chartwell house is now open to the public. It's another place I'd like to see if anybody wants to go see it. But just in everything he did, he put his whole heart into it. He has so many beautiful paintings that he did. He was just a dedicated painter. He went and he studied the painters, the artists, and he just really wanted to be a good painter. He never thought he was a good painter, but he wanted to be a good painter. He had wonderful paintings. Ultimately, Clementine sold those paintings in her later life after Winston Churchill died, and it was able to subsidize her later life because they didn't make lots of money. His writing brought in money, but they didn't make loads of money. So his contributions are just amazing, and he didn't come away with 5 houses or whatever nowadays politicians are coming away with. I mean, he served the country of England. He set out to serve it when he was young, and he served it till his dying day. And that's why I deeply respect Winston Churchill. And thank you very much, and have a nice day.